The Super Nintendo Entertainment System is my jam. It's home to some of the most influential games of all time, not just on the future of video games, but on me as a person. These are the games that made me, well, the completionist, even if I didn't get to play some of these until later in life. For those of you who've been around since the very beginning, you may be getting a sense of deja vu looking at this video and this list, but this is effectively a New Game Plus take on an old lost list. In my opinions, have kind of changed, so throw down your favorite Super Nintendo titles in the comments down below before I've said mine, and then scream at me as to why I didn't include them in my list, because here we are. Let's buckle up for my top 10 Super Nintendo games.
Number 10.
One of my big omissions from my original list was Super Mario World. And not to spoil the list, but it's not on here again. That's not to say that I don't love Mario World. It is one of my favorite games. But the Super Nintendo was home to plenty of bangers. Super Mario World is definitely one of the greatest and most influential 2D platformers of all time, and it demands your respect. So, I'm rectifying that misstep by now letting you know that Super Mario World 2 is on this list. Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island is one of the most delightful games on the Super Nintendo, with jovial, catchy melodies and a fantastic hand-drawn crayon aesthetic. Yoshi's Island is the game that showed us who Yoshi really was. He's not just a mount for Mario anymore. Yoshi's Island is where we learned that Yoshi can throw eggs, flutter jump, and even turn into a helicopter. Things that are as iconic as its ridiculous tongue. Yoshi's Island expanded Super Mario World in remarkable ways, introducing a new plethora of characters, mechanics, and enemies. It paved the way for Yoshi to have his own dang series full of stories, woolly and crafted worlds, and so much more. Now, Yoshis may touch fuzzy and get dizzy, but when you play Yoshi's Island, you get happy.
Number 9.
Like many people watching this, my first introduction to Earthbound was through the original Super Smash Bros., and that's on NES as a playable character. And at the time, wasn't really a fan. I'm more of a hit something as hard as you can kind of guy, not a weird, floaty lightning recovery guy. But back in 2014, a fan named Patrick Gurzy sent me his copy of Earthbound for the show, for me to keep, which honestly at the time, and still is to this day, a huge honor. And personally, I thought the game was amazing. And then I played it again on Super Beer Brothers, and I officially fell in love once again. Earthbound is a game that isn't afraid to get weird. The first character to help you is a tiny insect named Buzz Buzz. Part of the game literally has you play through a drug trip. Even the ad campaign wasn't afraid to get funky with the novelty scratch and sniff cards. And that is a bold choice. But don't let this fun weirdness fool you. Earthbound is a game that packs an emotional punch and can even get terrifying when you get towards the end of the journey. The creator, Shigesato Itoi, and longtime friend and collaborator, and eventually Nintendo president, Satoru Iwata, imagined a wonderfully memorable world. Earthbound sports exceptional art direction, quirky music, and a unique battle system of its time. It's turn-based just like most other RPGs of the era, but your health is represented by a rolling dial. That means you can try and heal party members before their HP actually hits 0. It's pretty clever, and clever is the perfect word to describe Earthbound. The game obviously is a cult classic for a reason, and now it's available on Nintendo Switch Online, so there's no excuse for you to not give it a shot.
Number 8.
You know, lately I've been meeting a lot of content creators who don't like this game, and I gotta tell ya, I'm angry at all of you, because I love this game. In the days of the Super Nintendo, everyone knew what they were in store for when it came to RPGs. That is until Secret of Mana flipped everything on its head. Although it still had the same high fantasy setting you might find in Squaresoft classics, Secret of Mana was one of the earliest RPGs to feature quote-unquote real-time combat. You could switch characters on the fly, change equipment, or cast spells by using the ring command in order to pause combat for a brief moment. This real-time combat was taken even further with another thing that RPGs didn't really have much of: multiplayer. If you had the super multi-tap, up to 3 people could play the game with you at the same time, which definitely makes the game even more enjoyable. All this innovation is balanced out with bright and beautiful pixel art graphics, an incredible score, and a wonderful story that is as epic as it is silly. Secret of Mana is one of those games that showed me what an RPG could be. And honestly, I still think it's a real shame that the 2018 remaster just underperformed for me in a lot of ways that the original Secret of Mana did. Secret of Mana is a beautiful game that still deserves attention all these years later. I recognize that the combat's not for everyone, but once you learn how to play the game, it is very, very fun.
Number 7.
There's a reason why the collective internet lost its mind over the announcement that Super Mario RPG was getting a remake for Switch. Super Mario RPG: The Legend of the Seven Stars seems like a dream from another reality. Squaresoft and Nintendo coming together to bring the best of both into one perfect package. Super Mario RPG works as the ideal fusion of a Mario platformer and a traditional RPG. All of the battles and exploration you'd expect from a Final Fantasy game are there, with a few notable changes. First, the game has an isometric point of view so that you can do some platforming in the main world. Second, attacking in battles is built much more around button presses and timing, much like how you would time your jumps in a Mario title. And because it's an RPG, this game is full of very weird, very charming, and very lovable characters. The game is brimming over with personality and heart. Every location is so fully realized and overflowing with memorable characters and moments and phenomenal music. Beyond the compelling story, you'll want to comb every corner for what is in this expansive new world that Mario has. Boss battles are very engaging, at times super challenging, and the game has incredibly strong writing throughout. And there are so many wild swings that are taken in Super Mario RPG, and they work to great effect. Characters like Booster and the Axum Rangers shouldn't work in the Mario universe, and yet they do perfectly. Add some wonderful characters like Mallow or the beloved puppet Geno that fans still want in Smash, and you have one of the most likable parties in an RPG ever. And Bowser and Peach are both in your party for the first time. Kind of a big deal. The spirit of Super Mario RPG is also responsible in no small parts to indirectly birthing the Paper Mario and Mario and Luigi series. So if you're a fan of those, you've got to play Super Mario RPG. And if you don't want to play the Super Nintendo version, just wait a couple of more months, because I can't believe it, the remake is almost here.
Number 6.
There are a few games that better drive you to become a completionist than that of the franchise that is Metroid. Specifically, Super Metroid. This is a game that rewards speedrunning and collecting. It even birthed its own genre. And even though Super Metroid isn't the first game to feature non-linear level design, it is the one that perfected it and deservedly garnered critical praise. Everything about Super Metroid is astonishing. The art direction creates a haunting beauty that invites the player to press on despite the sense of foreboding. Every corner of Zebes is scored to perfection, with a sonic landscape that evokes both the adventure ahead and the ominous dangers below. And as you progress, you find more items, perfect basic techniques, and flip from prey to predator. Then you beat the game and you want to do it again, only faster and better this time. Now that seems like a basic description, but if we're talking about me here, if you've been watching my stuff for the last 12 years, you've seen me talk about Super Metroid time and time again. From speedrunning to randomizers to teaching friends how to nail complex techniques, this game has been one of my obsessions throughout my career. Super Metroid is one of those games that is endlessly replayable and has changed the way that I see games forever.
Number 5.
When this list was made for the first time all those years ago, I noted that 2 games were missing because I hadn't played them yet, despite people saying they were some of the greatest games of all time. Earthbound and Chrono Trigger. Clearly I liked Earthbound, so what did I think of Chrono Trigger? Holy shit, it's amazing. First off, the creative pedigree behind the game is bonkers. You've got a script by Yuji Horii, creator of Dragon Quest. You've got art by Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball. You've got the designer of freaking Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi. And rounding it all off, the iconic score by Nobuo Uematsu. This is basically the Avengers team-up of the Super Nintendo RPG era. Chrono Trigger features all of the great gameplay that people have come to expect from Square, except that random battles occur wherever players are standing. This creates a level of smooth immersion that just isn't seen in traditional RPGs from this era. Add on some of the most incredible and phenomenal pixel art ever, with a wonderful story about time travel that never forgets itself, and you've got one of the best games ever made. What makes Chrono Trigger one of the all-time greats is its story. Not only are there tons of incredible characters, I'm looking at you, Frog. But it takes advantage of time travel in a way that truly feels novel, altering locations and even affecting the end of the story. Chrono Trigger has 13 unique different endings, and while this may seem daunting for completionists out there, each one just feels like a bonus for replaying the game over and over again. I love Chrono Trigger so much that I made it the subject of my 200th episode of The Completionist. Chrono Trigger left a huge impression on me and continues to reverberate to this day.
Number 4.
Guys, let's be honest. I'll decimate a Link to the Past randomizer any day, let alone a Super Metroid Crossing to the Past randomizer. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past is my favorite Zelda game of all time. It goes back and forth between this and A Link Between Worlds for the 3DS. A Link to the Past redefined what a top-down adventure could be. Everyone in the gaming industry took note of this entry and knew greatness had redefined the fantasy adventure genre, let alone defined what made a good Zelda game. Hyrule is vibrant and alive, the Dark World is a terrifying hellscape, the story is engaging, the music is exceptional, the dungeons are varied and inventive, the items are iconic. I can honestly gush about this game for hours, and I have multiple times. Speaking to townsfolks, doing side quests, finding every secret and maxing out everything. The game pushes you in a non-intrusive way to be the best version of Link you can be and best Ganon with such ease. There's just something so special about the feeling you get while playing a game like this. And that motivation has been with me for a long time, because this is the very first game I ever got on my Super Nintendo. I entered into that version of Hyrule when I was a young boy, and I am still happily playing it to this day.
Number 3.
It's hard to think of a game that I know better than Mega Man X. As a kid, I would play it endlessly, trying to figure out the best way to beat every level and Robot Master attached, or Maverick at this case. And even though it received 7 sequels and countless spin-offs, I still think the Mega Man X original is the best in the series. Mega Man X takes everything from the standard Mega Man series and harmoniously elevates every aspect of it. Movement options are heightened, level design is more immaculate than ever, of course the art is top-notch. The actual characters and story that is there is pretty engaging, and it's all complemented by some absolute bangers on the Super Nintendo. This to me is the definition of a comfort game. I can pick it up, wreck shop, completing the hell out of it in just over an hour. Now look, I'm not getting any speedrunning records by any means, but I'm always having a hell of a lot of fun whenever I dive back into Mega Man X. And hey, if you like Mega Man X right now, I just finished up a series on Super Beard Bros where I interview famous celebrities, content creators, and game developers and talk to them while I speedrun Mega Man X. There's 8 episodes for you to look, so you know, if you like the game as much as I do, come on by and watch them. It seriously feels like Mega Man X was made specifically for me. There's so much to do, it's enough of a challenge without feeling unfair, and in my eyes, it is endlessly replayable. Mega Man X is my favorite Mega Man game for a reason, and you'd be a fool to not play it.
Number 2.
Before we go on to talking about number 2 on this list, I want to show you something.
Okay, kid, show me what you got. Yeah, right.
This is the first commercial for Final Fantasy VI, originally introduced to us in the US as Final Fantasy III. This in no way represents what actually happens in the game, but it did do one thing right. It made little Gerard want to play that game. And fortunately for Gerard, his cousin Nick was there ready to oblige. Now, full disclosure, I don't talk about my family all that often outside of my immediate family, but my cousin Nick was the guy responsible for introducing me to gaming as a whole. And he started me off with the previously mentioned Secret of Mana and Final Fantasy VI. And these 2 games completely changed my life. Everything about Final Fantasy VI is perfect. Music, art, gameplay. But the thing that separates Final Fantasy VI from every other game is the story. It is complex and enthralling, often feeling like a high fantasy version of Star Wars, but even better. The stakes are high, the characters are relatable, and Kefka is an unbeatable villain. Seriously, he is like a combination of Ramsay Bolton, the Joker, and Iago from Othello. If I were to choose a moment that defined this entire game, it would be the infamous opera scene. It's beautiful, enchanting, silly, and larger than life. And all of this on a 16-bit console. Absolutely astounding. In my opinion, Final Fantasy VI walked so that Final Fantasy VII could run. Both are great ensemble pieces, but without 6, there is no 7. Final Fantasy VI is my Final Fantasy. I love it so much that I've said often, and it is true, that it will be one day the penultimate episode of The Completionist when I'm finally done with the YouTube grind. So in that case, what will be my grand finale? Well, you have no further to look than number 1 on this list.
Number 1!
Now, this one should not be a surprise to anyone who's a fan of my channel. Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest is my undisputed favorite game of all time. So it stands to reason that it would be my favorite Super Nintendo title. There's so many reasons that I love this game, and while everything in this video has been me reading from a script, I'm just going to talk about it from my heart as I think of it. Donkey Kong Country 2's Diddy's Kong Quest was the last game that my mom bought me before she got sick. That is why it is my number 1 game with regards to sentimental value. Luckily for me, this game is phenomenal outside of that. The game kind of proposes and answers the question of what if player 2 went on their own journey to save player 1. Player 2 up to this point has kind of been the sidekick character in the form of Diddy Kong, and now he has number 2 in the form of Dixie Kong. The game is darker, the levels are more difficult but more complex. The soundtrack is way more leveled up from the first game. Every stage is full of bonus barrels with secrets and challenges within them, DK coins, collecting Kong in every stage to get 1-ups if you need them, and then getting gold coins to either get hints or to even make a save. The platforming is so perfect. The game has so many highs and lows that are exciting and scary, difficult but rewarding. There's not a dull moment in this game. The reason why I say this will be my very last episode is because it's kind of my swan song. That episode will be my worst episode ever because I'm going to essentially release it like I intended to when I first started the show. I know on YouTube I've been known a lot as like the Final Fantasy guy, the indie guy, the platformer guy, the banjo guy. But if I am responsible for anything, if someone called me the Donkey Kong Country 2 guy, that would be amazing. I did not do a very good job talking about how great this game is, and honestly, that's okay. Because when I do decide to walk away from all of this, you'll know exactly bit by bit why this game is just the absolute best in my eyes. So that's been my top 10 Super Nintendo games. I'm sure I didn't cover some of your favorites, and hey, that's okay. The console just has too many great titles. And as a reminder, if you want to watch some of my interviews with some awesome guests while I speedrun Mega Man X, there's a link on screen right now or a playlist down below. Thanks for watching, and hope you're all doing well. Bye.